really appreciate everyone joining us for another installment of the Chief's Straight Talk series. For those of you who aren't familiar with our little Facebook endeavor, we'll get together with the Chief to take on some brutally honest, third rail kind of conversations, the kind of conversations that traditionally government and police don't want to touch. These are conversations that our chief here in Charlotte wants to take on and really engage with. So today we have a pretty interesting panel of guests. To my left, Cindy Decker, South Charlotte woman, didn't grow up in South Charlotte, from Detroit originally. Guess you could say she's a pretty involved, engaged person in the faith-based community in South Charlotte. Really became aware of what's going on in our community to a large extent following the Keith Lamont Scott riots back in 2016. And we're going to get into Cindy's story a little bit more in depth as the program develops. On the far left, to the Chief's left, is a fella who's gained some national notoriety, is a Charlotte product, Belton Platt, someone who they'd written a book about. His story, his life story is based on a book, or the book is based actually on your story, growing up in Charlotte, 20 years incarcerated, drug distribution, Cherry Hills neighborhood, the Piedmont Courts neighborhood, and the book Money, or what's the name of that book? Money Rock. Money Rock was based on your life. Now, since the book's been released, this man's just on a crusade of redemption and really trying to get in front of young people when he sees them heading down the path that he was heading down. Really tries to get out in front and put those kind of warnings out there to show them that that kind of lifestyle isn't all that's cracked up to be. So. Come from a fairly different kind of journey, but journeys collide today for this Straight Talk session, and we're going to unpack that in great detail in just a little bit. Chief, you were adamant about getting these two players together. Why is it so important?
Well, what struck me is, I think it was last year, 2018 Movement Day. I was on a panel that talked about how can we come together and make Charlotte a better place to live, especially for youth. And I challenged the houses of worship to not compete but collaborate. One of the ideas was to have predominantly black churches and white churches do community service together. Haven't had really much of a follow-up then, but these two really triggered that thought in my mind again. So I wanted to breathe new life into it and see if these two partners could kind of jumpstart that and make that happen.
Give us the quick and skinny, if you could, Belton, your story, 35 seconds, a minute, just your background really quickly. And it's, I know there's a lot of twists and turns.
I grew up here in the city of Charlotte, had a very traumatic upbringing, watching my father stab my mother, and that affected my life a lot as a youth. In the end, having a vision to be a lawyer, becoming a Life Scout, working in the community with different politicians, and my mother, who was a political activist. Later on in my sort of teenage year, young adult years, got into the drug game, introduced to that by my biological father, became one of the biggest drug dealers here in the city of Charlotte. Ended up in a shootout, Piedmont Court shootout, where 7 people were shot. Very tragic thing. And then after that, my case was overturned a year later, and then the FBI come at me, and I got 24 years federal and did 21 and a half years in federal prison.
It's incredible journey, and I'm sure you've seen a lot through those years behind bars, and probably learned a lot and a lot of introspection there. I find it kind of this dichotomy here. You have you in your journey in Piedmont Courts. Now, Chief is kind of an up-and-comer cop at this point. This is an area that you're patrolling in. This is an area that you're policing in, and he's trying to keep this neighborhood safe, a guardian of this community. And you're essentially turning this community on its head through drug distribution. Your thoughts there, Chief?
Well, it was early 90s when I was a Charlotte Housing Authority police officer. So we were jointly working, obviously, as a police department, but assigned to public housing, and Piedmont Courts was one of those housing projects at the time that I was assigned to. Came in a little bit behind the work there, but it was still that type of environment at the time, lacking in hope, and a lot of people pushing crack cocaine.
Yeah, this is at the height of the crack
was.
epidemic. Fair to say this was a community under siege because of that epidemic, Chief?
Absolutely was. That year we had more homicides than we've had, I think it was 93, than we've had in the city since. So it was some pretty tough times.
You know, Belton, you do the upwards of a couple of decades in prison. How do you make this turnaround? Does a light switch go off one day and say, hey, look, this isn't the way?
Well, to be honest with you, before all of that happened, a light switch came on. I got tired of the life that I was living, and long story short, I think it's in the book. One day my mother come by my nightclub, and while she was leaving, she told me she was going to a church, and I said, a church on a Friday night? And she was like, yeah. I said, they have church on Friday? She was like, yeah. And when she walked out the door, she said to me, she said, do you want to send something to the church? She was asking money, like a donation. And I went off. I mean, I said, those no good preachers, I said, I won't give anything. They're con artists, they're this. And I said to her, I said, you give my money to that preacher? And she was like, well, I pay my tithes and offerings. I didn't know what tithes and offerings were. All I knew, he was robbing my mother. And that Sunday, Saturday night, I got home from the club around 4. And I asked my wife, I said, look, get me a suit together. I'm going to church. And that next morning, I took a 45 and put it up under my armrest. And I took a 38 shot of I can say this around Chief now, right? And took a 38 shot of arms and put it in my inside suit pocket. And I made up my mind to go and shoot him and make an example of him. And this was my first encounter as far as with church, with the Lord's house. I went in there to shoot him. And to my surprise, he was actually our role model when we were coming up, like our idol. He was the pimp, the drug dealer, all of this stuff that we looked up to. But he was the one at the church preaching, and I said, let me see what this blank got to say before I shoot him. And he was talking about the love of God and the blood of Jesus. And before long, I was up in front of the church with my gun, and he coming down the line praying for people. And when he got to me, I was like, Butch, what's up? I stopped the service because I wanted to know what happened to him.
He won you over.
And I said, I told my mom, I said, that's a pimp and a drug dealer. She said, no, that's what he used to be. He's a man of God now.
Look at that.
And right there is where it all began.
Well, I mean, if that's not an illustration of what redemption looks like, I don't know what in the world does. And just so neat that journey, that turnaround, started in the faith-based community, in a house of worship like that.
It did.
You too. I mean, your experience with the faith-based community was kind of unique as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Cindy?
Just the short version would be after I came to Christ, I was determined to go on the mission field. So I spent a few years in the poorest area of South America. And during that time is when I had this revelation of all humanity, all of us, are all the same on every level. We all have the same, you talk about common ground, it's dirt. And I literally lived with people that lived in dirt huts and that kind of thing. And you recognize that when you're emptied out, you're in that place of being nothing in your own estimation, your capacity expands, and recognizing the value of a human life really kind of shifted my worldview drastically. So coming off the mission field is shortly before I moved here to Charlotte. And that's kind of been my passion, is helping bridge those differences in a way that we don't have to fight over all of the other peripheral things, but if we can agree on the value of human life, then we can have a conversation. And so when the Keith Scott Lamont shooting happened and Charlotte went up in flames, it was like, okay, it's time to get in the game. It's time to get involved. It's time to find out where the divisions are and make some changes, build some bridges.
You weren't just watching this on television. You were there. You were there on the ground and had a very unique perspective, vantage point, and saw it through an interesting lens. What were some of your experiences being there on the ground during the height of this?
we probably were disobeying orders from law enforcement.
We don't
because
encourage that, by the way.
no, but there was a group of pastors that said, look, we need to get down there. We need to just walk with the protesters. We need to get in that place and kind of get a vibe of what's really happening. And so, we all agreed, listen, this is our city, and we're not going to let it get hijacked by some crazy agenda. Where's the pain? Where's the broken places? Let's find out where things are at. And so some of us just started walking with the protesters and asking them questions.
And what was bubbling up? What was some of the glaring takeaways for you?
There
Was there any common thread? Was there any overarching kind of thought?
There were people there that were genuinely hurting, felt trapped, felt locked into their circumstances. This was an opportunity to do something about it in their context. But then there were other people that we met from Ferguson and all these outside groups that were bussed in, and that was our wake-up call to say, no, not in our city.
Chief, you've always been of the mind, and we spent a lot of time together during that week, that it really transcended an officer-involved shooting, that there were more things at play there than just that incident that some think may have prompted it. There was other things bubbling up, were there not?
Sure, it was. That was just the environment. I mean, you had the Castile shooting, you had Michael Brown shooting, you had a lot of different issues like that around the city. We also saw that time where social media was capturing and quickly putting out a narrative relative or not of the facts. It was just putting out a narrative that pulled at people's heartstrings.
Sure.
People had that deficit of faith and hope, and it was just a matter of time before the right match lit that flame. And that's what we saw here as well as around the country during that time.
Yeah, the planets lined up, to the point that they did, and I think that had a lot to do with what prompted it too. Cindy, full disclosure, just to set the table somewhat, it wasn't too soon thereafter that, we meet and through another party, and you're at the table for what was the inception of the Bridging the Difference. And I remember Chief bringing you in and how impressed he was with you, and how, it was just funny watching the two of you just finish each other's sentences. Why, what brought you to the table? Was it just the Keith Lamont Scott thing, or was there something bigger that really brought you to the table here? Well,
we saw results. Being in the streets, walking with the people, we saw and felt the disarming of some of the tensions in a very real way. Yeah. And then it was, we were disappointed that we didn't have a large amount of the faith community that wanted to get involved and wanted to help.
And why is that? I mean, you're embedded in that community. You've got your opinions and ideas as to why they haven't taken maybe as active of a role that they could take or should take.
Well, I think it's a few things, but sometimes it's just indifference. People are comfortable in their world, and I don't believe that on a large scale at all, at least what I have encountered, that it's based on we hate each other, or there's all this division and all of these other issues. I think people are just indifferent because they're caught up in their own little bubbles, and what breaks the bubble is usually crisis before we decide, hey, you know what, we really need each other. And then I don't think pastors really know, how do we get involved? How do we practically get our people involved? And what Chief suggested with the Bridging the Differences idea, I thought this is our opportunity where we can actually start coming together under this banner of keeping our city safe and for the overall well-being of our city, which is where we should be engaged as the faith community, instead of always focusing on go into all the world, go into the nations. I was part of that. But if you don't care about your own neighborhood,
sure,
it'll be in your backyard.
Sure.
And demonstrate that, it's pretty much our assignment to bring reconciliation, to where we're literally looking for where there's discord to bring unity. So, it's just making it real, making it practical where we live.
Don't want you to lose your thought there, but I do want to get Belton in. Your thoughts, Belton, on the role of the church and faith-based community when it comes to issues as important as these issues are.
This is one of the things that we had to deal with in Conway, South Carolina. Dealing with that, we launched a ministry there called Rock Ministries Church International. And one of the problems we had down there was bridging the difference between the races and denominations.
Right.
And so when you look at that, and I was listening to that, I believe one of the issues, I believe the church had become complacent. We have gotten so comfortable with our Sunday morning services, our Wednesday night Bible studies, and we think that that's all we need to do to get to heaven. But then we forget, and just to piggyback on what you said, Jesus sent them first to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, then to the uttermost parts of the earth. And so as a believer, as a pastor, one of my first priorities in the community is to tend to the needs of the community, minister to the needs of the community, and to bridge the gap between the races, but also the faith community. And so in doing that, I believe we had to get past our own prejudices, our own fears, and another thing, our doctrinal differences, and come together, like you said, on one accord on what we do agree on. Right. And that is that God is the Father of all, Jesus is our Lord, and as a body of believers, we have a responsibility to share the love of Christ and to come together as one. In fact, that's what Jesus' prayer was in John 17. Father, I pray that they all may be one as we are one. And so if we don't do that, then actually we're hypocritical, because we're calling ourselves to lead the way, but then even within ourselves, there's division and separation. And I've heard the statistics say one of the most segregated times in America is on Sunday mornings.
Right.
And so it's not just Charlotte and the community. We just have to make a difference. We got to get past this stuff, come together and bridge the differences between our congregations and walk in the love of Christ like he commanded us to.
Chief, thoughts?
Yeah, well, I attended a church, Ebenezer Baptist, over on Sugar Creek, and have family members who are members there. And I went there and met Pastor Dr. Lynch, and his men's ministry had just started this. This isn't an idea that hadn't been vetted, and they reached out because it's a predominantly black church, black men, and they reached out to white men's ministry and did the same thing, and they do service projects together. And it's something as simple as that. It is simple, but it's not easy. It is simple because it's easy.
And there's a difference between simple and easy.
Absolutely. It's very simple, but you have to go in and you have to open up your heart a bit. You have to talk to people who are different than you, but your mission is the same. So they started doing this, and they're raving about the success. I just saw these two, met these two. I think it's all by design, not by default. And I pitched the idea to them, and now I think we're going to move it forward. I think for the first time, we're going to have an opportunity to really intentionally bridge the difference in a tangible way for houses of worship. And I think it is simple. It's just not that easy.
Chief, so I guess that's what success looks like here, is bringing those two sides, those So maybe you're the wrong person to ask, but I'm going to ask anyway. These events, all of this execution, a lot of it is being undertaken by the police department. Soup to nuts, a lot of work, a lot of coordination, a lot of moving parts. It would be nice to have some help in that regard, would it not?
First of all, our philosophy is community policing. So policing is a part of what we do. The community work is really what matters.
Sure.
We do more community work than we do policing. I mean, we're law enforcement, going to enforce the laws, but it's bigger than us. But if we can be the catalyst to bring people together, I don't intend to do their work. They're going to do it. But it's as simple as two congregations who don't look alike coming together to do their missions work together. And the friendships and relationships that build from there, take care of themselves. It's organic. But the design is come together with somebody different than you, bridge that difference, do the work of your mission. We're not trying to change your belief system. We're just trying to improve the lives of those who need us most. I think it's pretty impactful.
You know, you always set the table in that you talk about how easy it is for you to draw a crowd at a Rotary Club event, or pack a congregation in West Charlotte at church. But what the trick has been, and a difficult one at that, has been getting everyone together. What do you attribute that to, Chief?
Well, comfort zones. They've been
Yes.
talking about it. You're comfortable. You're comfortable in the environment that you grow up in and that you worship in and everything else. I think the simple is you both have the same mission. The difficult part is you're doing it different than your normal would. You would not be in that same circle. You got to pop that bubble we keep talking about and step outside of what you're comfortable doing to do it for the greater good. And I think it's a pretty impactful way of doing business. And I can't wait to see those results.
Cindy and I, we walked over and, we had a quick chat on the way over to the studio, and we were talking about, how probably one of the more divisive times in our country's history right now with, people are, kind of dug in and their own ideologies and their own political stripe. But you really laid it out well, and that's all fine and good, but where there's always common ground.
Yes.
There's always an area of agreement, and that's what we need to look for. Is that kind of the way you see things?
Yes, I think that the reality is when we go through crisis, when we go through difficulties, it's not prejudice. We all suffer through different things in life. And the brilliant thing about what Chief is thinking and his vision is really a gift to the churches, in my opinion, because it gives us something we can serve in, a way to get involved. And who knows better in a community of where the broken places are than law enforcement? They see them every day. So to me, it's like the perfect match of being in touch, knowing what's going on, because law enforcement deals with people's actions. Actions start by, first, what do you believe in?
Yeah.
And so if we can work with people's beliefs on a basic level.
When you say we, mean the
churches,
faith-based community, right?
Yeah. Is knowing the needs in the community and how people believe. And I think a demonstration of churches coming together, black and white churches particularly, is really the answer of helping to not only discover getting into families and building those relationships where the broken places are, but helping some of those beliefs change to where people have hope. And that social capital that, it's all by relationship anyway. That's what gives us value and meaning. We spend so much time running after happiness, which it's always elusive and out there, but what we're really looking for is meaning. And you don't find meaning in life outside of the context of human relationships. And I think we could be a big help coming together for the city, but also the partnership, I think, is very strategic.
Do you see opportunity there, Belton?
I do. While you were talking, Cindy, I was saying to myself, really, it's really sad that we have to even come together. In fact, the chief of police have to bring faith groups and faith community, the community together and say, look, the city's hurting. We're hurting. We need you all to come together. I'm giving you the opportunity. We need your help. We want to work with you, and we want you all to work with us. This having to do that, and you can't talk about faith groups without talking about faith.
Right.
And that is everything that we represent.
Yes, sir.
Is God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever what believe in him will not perish but have everlasting life. And so the whole message of the gospel is the love of Christ. Jesus said, by this shall all men know you're my disciples. Not by your big churches, not by the cars you drive, not by the buses, but by your love one for another.
Right.
And so when you look at this and you think about this, the question is not, should we come together? The question is why we're not together.
Right, exactly.
You know, and I think that we all, as far as pastors, the faith community, need really to take a look at ourselves.
Yeah.
Look at our mission statements, our statement of faith, and see if we are in line with what we say we believe.
Yeah.
In the throes of this, why are you not coming together? You know, I mean, I know you're one person and this is one perspective, but you know, from your perspective, why haven't they been able to pull it together?
Again, getting back to what we said in the beginning, complacency and our own little bubbles, afraid to get out the box, you know, or another thing too, we have this thing where they're our churches. When they're not, there's only one church, and that is the Church of the Lord Jesus Christ.
It's a little territorial.
It's territorial.
Oh, yes.
And so, in some cases, and I guess I can be honest, some cases it's, I don't want you to get more notoriety than me, and then why are you on the program and not me? And so if we can get past all of these type things, we can get past all of this and just say, look, we're called together to come together to do a great work and bridge our differences together, love one another, love the community, and work together. Only then we'll see the change that we want to.
We've got producers who are giving us the wind up
Yes, sir.
because we're getting close. It wouldn't be a straight talk segment. It wouldn't be a bridging the difference segment. Chief is very big on measuring results, call to action, what success looks like. So it's my understanding that success looks like you two bridging. And,
Absolutely.
you know, at the risk of putting you both on the spot, maybe what success could look like is maybe sometime in June, maybe you bring a part of your community in the faith-based area, and Cindy does the same, and we bring them together for a meaningful Bridging the Difference event. Is that something that we can get our arms around?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, again, let's keep it simple.
Yes, sir.
I'm running out of words. The work is, there's a service project. Maybe it's a Habitat for Humanity build, or it's something at the one of the shelters or the food bank, and you just bring in your congregations and we work together. I mean, it's just that simple. There's plenty of need.
Yes.
There needs to be some people who can fill those needs, and I think on either side of me, we have some people who are going to step up in June and lead the way in that.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
Chief, you know, if I'm hearing you too, you know, far more interested, and you think there's far more impact in going deep than going wide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to go wide anyway when people model it. And again, I'm uncomfortable with you saying it's my idea. It's not. Dr. Lynch has been doing this in Ebenezer, his men's group, and they're working with another congregation. You got some very diverse houses of worship already and elevation and transformation. So this is not work that's going to hurt anybody. I just say my challenge on Movement Day last year, I want to see come to fruition because I think we have it in us. And it's simple, just not easy. Simply get your people to build a house for Habitat for Humanity, or come out and do a service project at the food bank, or wherever you have that passion. Just do it collaboratively and let's stop competing.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anything we missed, Chief? Belton, real quick, wrap it up.
Well, I was thinking about the fires in California.
Okay.
And when you look at what started those fires, you know, they say it only take a spark to start a fire. And I believe with this program, with Bridging the Different program, I believe the spark have taken place, and I believe the fire is getting ready to start, and it will spread throughout the community. That's what I see.
Ms. Decker?
I just had this picture of some power tools. So you can be Black and I'll be Decker. Okay? And we'll be a team.
Look at that. Wow, that'd be great. Wow. Some marketing genius is going to get their
No,
arms
I'm
around it.
excited. I'm excited because
I am
it'll breathe new life into the community. And though you're not willing to take credit for the idea, it's really through law enforcement. That's a fresh idea. That's a fresh idea for the churches to say, wow, we can totally get behind what law enforcement is doing, and then they're going to open the door for us to find where the needs are.
I can say this, since the chief don't want to take credit. I can say it's a God idea. It's been a God
There we go.
idea
That's the
since
truth.
the beginning.
Much
That's
better.
the
And
truth.
what God does, he drop his ideas in people. And it's up to us to run with God ideas.
That's
and
right.
Unity, love, coming together has been God idea since the creation of Adam and Eve.
That's something we could all rally around. Anything for the greater good, Chief?
I think you've heard it. This has been great. I just look forward to joining the work.
Yeah. And unrelated, since we're on the subject somewhat of bridging the difference, it's going to be March 21st, not 24th, Cindy Decker. She's
Stop.
trying
I
to
did
confuse
not
me
tell
with the
you that.
dates. She's good like that sometimes, trying to get me off rhythm. March 21st over at Calvary Church. Opioid epidemic. We really want to take
Very
some of the
important.
stigma out of that, a lot of the misinformation, talk about just how prevalent it is, and it's not just really an epidemic in one part of town, any one type of socioeconomic station or class, race. This thing doesn't discriminate at all. It's going to be a spirited conversation on the opioid epidemic. That's on March 21st
Yes.
over at Calvary Church, 6:30 to 8:30 that evening. That's a conversation that people are definitely going to want to get involved with. Appreciate everyone. I know how busy you are, and
Thank
you
you.
are just running like
Thank
a
you.
firecracker all the time. We can't thank you enough for stopping in,
thank you for
and
having us.
suspect that we're going to see a lot of both of you in the
Absolutely.
coming months
Yes.
as the Chiefs Bridging the Different series
Yes.
continues to develop.
Yes.
Appreciate you, Chief, and how
Thank you.
busy you
Always.
are as well. And we will see you next time for the next Chiefs Straight Talk session. Lord only knows who we're going to have on deck for the next go-around, but I promise you this, it'll be a good one. Appreciate the time.